What's up, people? I'm Shaggy the Opinionated Hippie, and today I'd like to talk about my ranking of George Clinton's Parliament albums. Sort of one half of his sort of P-Funk dynasty that pretty much ruled the 70s, dipped their toes into the 80s a little bit after that, but for the most part were the funk juggernaut of the 70s. Parliament is the group that leaned less on like guitar energy, guitar rock, psych rock, definitely a little more horn saturated. You had the Parliaments, the singers, a lot of that beautiful just vocal harmonies, that sort of 50s doo-wop energy that was the Parliaments being infused into 70s funk. You got just amazing bass players, amazing keyboards, amazing musicians, with George Clinton sort of like spearheading the whole affair. There were 10 albums that Parliament released, 8 of them in the 70s, one in 1980. Then they dropped another one about 6 years ago, 2018. I'm going to rank those according to my favorite. None of them are bad. All of them are pretty much, other than the first one and the last one, pretty much the straightforward funk. Horns, awesome vocals, some theatrics, of course. We got some theatrics that reach into there. Some sort of like narrative talking, sort of like almost hype man type stuff, or just kind of not really rapping, but talking their way through a lot of songs. Clinton doing that. But yeah, absolutely amazing band. And there's a couple albums on here, at least one that is a perfect funk album, maybe two. Frank Zappa Connection. They both exist in a world in which Michael Brecker and Randy Brecker are available to play horns. And they both played horns for Zappa. They both played horns for Clinton in Parliament. Another thing is I think you could compare Zappa and Clinton sort of running their own same little like musical sort of like empires. You know, Zappa, you had the mothers of invention, and while he eventually got rid of that phrase and just referred to his band as the Rockin' Teenage Combo or whatever. You very much had this the genius figure at the core doing their thing with Zappa. Same with Clinton, just sort of different purposes. Also, they both got political. They both did a lot of kind of the same stuff within those worlds. And they both also found amazing musicians and gave amazing musicians chances to do amazing things as musicians. So there's that connection. But yeah, that's it. Literally, this is just a list of my ranking of my favorite. We'll go from 10 to 1. I'll put the list up on the screen when I'm done. And then we go from there, however you want to go from there. But anyways, yeah, let's do it. Let's get on to number 10. Number 10 is their 1980 release, Trombipulation. I believe this was the first one Clinton kind of stepped back from as far as like producer. I think Bootsy Collins had a heavier hand in this than other albums. And I think Bootsy, my understanding is like played almost all the instruments on a number of the tracks. And this said just, it feels like an album in which the band can still lay down the funk. It's not a bad album. It's still enjoyable from start to finish. But when you're done with it, I don't think there's anything that really lingers in your soul like some of their other funk does. It's one of those which just seems like a band who's maybe running out of gas. The fact that Clinton also was maybe a little hands off on this, and it maybe just shows that the Parliament was running its course. They wouldn't make another album for 38 years after this. Clinton would drop his solo album right after this, right? Like 2 years after this, he would drop Computer Games. So we're going into slight, so we can tell Parliament's kind of running this course. And really, I think there's 8 songs on here. I think one of them clearly rises above the rest, and there's even a Zappa connection in that one. Agony of Defeat. Defeat being your feet down there, the dogs that are barking. There's a lot of nose references on here. There's a lot of we're nasal sapiens. There's a lot of nose type puns and playing with nose stuff on here. But it's the Agony of Defeat that I think is clearly the best track on here. It's one of the longest tracks at like 6.5 minutes. It's just got an early, almost Prince sounding funk to it, like beep, beep, almost like on his first couple of albums, that early Prince type funk. It's got a Hi Ho Silver Away reference connecting to Zap On You Can't Do That on Stage, Volume 3. It's got a pretty nice guitar solo in it. It's just really upbeat, funky, early Prince type stuff, with a little bit of like Parliament madness thrown in. It's a toe jam session. They throw toe jam session in there. Just writing down some little lyrics that really jump out at me. But I think it's the highlight of the album, and it's right there at the end of like side A, the fourth song on the album out of 8. Everything else on here is just kind of like really upbeat, happy funk with some like, you get some like sort of Prince's Camille type, those like tweaked high noise, like almost babyish voices, but it's that weird sort of funk voice that Prince would sometimes use. You get that little bit of Camille energy in here on like the opening Crush It. You got some great keyboard sounds. Bernie Worrell is on here, one of the master keyboardists of all time. He's dropping some cool sounds all over the place. Of course, you got Bootsy Collins on bass, which always sounds good. But Crush It, it's kind of happy, upbeat funk. Trombibulation has a little more piano energy, like a more like stomping type slower funk, just a little more, I mean, not slower, but a little more bun, bun. A lot of nose references in this one, of course. You got those sort of cartoon funky vocals that come in at time, that sort of like theatrical aspect that Parliament would play around with. Long Way Around, nice softer song. I think there's strings on this one on a couple songs. Right? We either get some strings or we get some synths that very much sound like they're trying to sound like strings. Maybe a softer, more vocal-centric song. Agony Defeat right in the middle is the best. New Do Review, despite a horrible title, it actually has some pretty great groove in it. More of those keyboard string sounds, some really kind of cartoonish type vocals. And then the closing tracks, Let's Play House, just some really nice horn-based funk, some great bass playing by Bootsy on here, just bringing out some really funky sounds. Body Language, nice, happy, swinging, kind of bouncy type funk. And then we close out with Pika Groove, which is like more of a jam, kind of a more upbeat jam to close out the album. One of the longer tracks on the album. It's a solid funk album, but I walk away from this really Agony Defeats the one song. I'm like, okay, I kind of remember that. Everything else just sounds like really good funk. But really kind of can't compare it to the stuff that precedes it, because you got, this is album number 9. Album number 8's a little but the other 7 before that are just absolutely fantastic. So, number 10, Trombipulation. Number 9 is their 8th, which came out before the one I just talked about in 1979. This is Gloryhallastoopid, or Pin the Tail on the Funky. The last album, the one that precedes this, ends with one of my all-time favorite Parliament songs. At the end of what is a solid album, that the second half of the album just keeps getting better and better and better. And then this one kicks off with, you get a short little prologue, but then the second song on the album is a song called is the title track. Gloryhallastoopid, parentheses, and then Pin the Tail on the Funky. Fantastic song. Completely continues the awesome energy that closes the previous album. It's got this nice, like, you get the prologue, which has like a spoken intro part. You kind of that deep voice, like you get some ominous space noise, like your typical almost like a Funkadelic intro, like where Clinton's narrating. You get that deep, and then they kind of speed up the voice and get it cartoonish. And then we go into Gloryhallastoopid with this awesome like horn drop, and the groove drops, and we're in this song. It's absolutely awesome, super funky, great groove. Star Child gets referenced. Got a really nice piano. You got a nice saxophone playing. Really nice loose jam. But it's only 4 minutes long, and it should have been 8. It should have been 9. It should have been 10, because this is the sickest, deepest, like this is the groove. Unfortunately, the rest of this album just kind of like, we get some longer grooves, including the next song, Party People, which is like 10 minutes long. But it's not as dynamic as what we're used to with Parliament. Like all the right elements are there, right? You got some great bass playing, you got some horn charts that are fantastic. You know, you just got some great grooves, but we're not really bringing the dynamic stuff, or we're not bringing the really, really heavy hooks, the ones that like linger in your soul. And so after Gloryhallastoopid, it feels like the album almost plateaus out, and we get funk, but it's just not as dangerous. It doesn't feel as like, I don't know, it's like edgy. It's lacking something. So Party People at 10 plus minutes maybe just goes on a little bit too long. I think like the energy, Gloryhallastoopid, that should have been 10 minutes and this could have been 4, and that would have been an absolute awesome switch. The Big Bang Theory has a really cool Boogie on Reggae Woman vibe that really works, that really helps the song. That sounds absolutely fantastic. Some great keyboard sounds. It's another one of those that maybe goes on a little bit too long in 7 minutes. The Freeze, Sizzling Mean, nice funk jam with a really weird, almost metronomic percussive clang that goes on for way too long. This is another jam at like 9 minutes that, for being as static as it is, just I feel like it just goes on too long and not enough happens. Like they didn't know how to edit this down or when to edit this down, or they did and they just chose not to. Color Me Funky has some like traditional Parliament type vocals. This is more of what we would call like an actual song, you know, more of a formal structure. Theme from the Black Hole kicks off with, hey, this is a toast to the booty. And then we're off from there. Really nice funk song that feels at first in the beginning, it's only like 4.5 minutes, but like the first 2.5 minutes almost feels like an actual song, like someone sat down and put like some thought into like structure. And then it, in this case, kind of just evolves into a jam that just kind of treads the same water over and over again. And then the last song, May We Bang You, May We Bang You, May We Bang You. Some nice upbeat funk with the plea, May We Bang You, in the lyrics. Straightforward sounding pop funk. Not a bad album. Like I don't not enjoy this. And I think there's actually the second track, the title track is phenomenal. But it does seem to be treading water a little bit by the time we reach the end of it. And it feels like some of these jams, it's almost like they ran out of ideas, so they padded it with some jams that maybe could have been edited to something a little more dynamic or shut down, and you still get the same gist of it after 3 minutes than you do in like 8. Still enjoy it. Still think it's a pretty solid listen, but definitely in their discography, it would be my number 8, Gloryhallastoopid. Number 8 is Osmium, their 1970 debut album. They wouldn't put out another album for 4 years after this. And while Eddie's here, a P-Funk legendary, Eddie Hazel, Bernie's here, Clinton's here, it doesn't really feel like a Parliament album. It does at times, but it also feels like a Funkadelic album at times with some of the like harder rock energy. Kind of reminds me of Spirit circa this time with a little psych pop energy. We got one song, what is it? Oh Lord, Why Lord / Prayer. Straight up like Baroque pop like energy that could be dropped in any number of bands' albums from this decade. Some Dr. Hook energy with some of the more like, there's a country song, Little Old Country Boy. Sounds like something Dr. Hook would have dropped. A band that sort of was like kind of weird, funky, but also kind of tongue-in-cheek humorous. Like, this is an album that sounds pure 1970. Like everybody was just like, hey, I'm going to take a little bit from here, a little bit from here, a little bit from here. We're going to put it in a pot. Let's see what happens. Again, it's got those like Parliament signature things that pop up every so often. But it really does sound like a band looking for its sound. And like, I think Funkadelic had dropped an album earlier in this year. A couple months earlier, you get this. You wouldn't get another Parliament album for another 4 years, but you would get a couple Funkadelic albums. So I think Clinton was still trying to figure out this sound maybe a little bit. I Call My Baby Pussycat. Lots of whistling in this song. I'm not a big fan of whistling in songs. A nice guitar solo. You got some nice guitar playing. Eddie Hazel is bringing that guitar energy really well on this. Put Love in Your Life. Kind of a slow jazzy number with some really deep vocals in it that are pretty cool. We get a nice long sort of, not long, it's a 5-minute song, but we get sort of a rock funk jam in this. like a collective jam, and everybody's just kind of jamming out some funk rock energy. So we're definitely kind of in territory Parliament wouldn't be in as much for every album out after here. Little country boy, you got yodeling, you got a barrel, 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 one of those mouth harps, you got pedal steel, straight up Dr. Hook vibes. There's another song later on in this album. I'm getting straight up Dr. Hook vibes. My Automobile, straight up Dr. Hook vibes. Moonshine Heather is probably the highlight on here. What else? Towards the end of the album, you got Funky Woman, really nice organ presence on here, and then the drums, and then we drop in probably the funkiest groove on this album yet, like 8 songs into it. Living the Life, it's kind of about Jesus. This is a very almost gospel-y folk number, one of the highlights of this album. This maybe leads a little more of what Parliament is going to bring, with sort of that, just the choral singing, the Parliament's doing their singing, that sort of slightly religious, spiritual gospel vibe. I think Jesus gets specifically name dropped in this song. And then we close out with the Silent Boatman, which is one of those like slowly building like songs. At times kind of reminds me of Traffic a little bit. But anyways, yeah, it's an interesting album. It's got some strong points. It's got some weird points. It's a little bit eclectic. Would be higher up if this wasn't a Parliament list, and if the other 7 of these just each didn't drop absolute funk monsters. But yeah, my number 8, a solid entry, Osmium. My number 7 is their 2018 double CD release, Medicaid Fraud Dogg. Yeah, 38 years after their previous album, they drop another one. We get 23 tracks. There is a lot of lyrically, it deals with the title. George Clinton, his family story, I think his dad worked in pharmaceuticals, or he knows a lot about like the pharmaceutical energy, and there's sort of a lyrical theme of the problem with pharmaceuticals and embracing funk as the alternative to like solving your problems, as always. An album that is way better than it has any right to be. I will say this, it's 23 tracks, and really the first 6 tracks, I can't say I was sold on it. I thought, okay, coming back, trying some good things. The funk is there, the horns are there, the bass is there, like all the pieces are there. It sounds like a 2018 album from a band that was dropping bombs in 1970. But then we get to song number 7, I'm Gonna Make You Sick on Me, in which we get some like heavy beat electronic funk a la Prince. We get some like, we get an almost Ween vibe, like Monique the Freak type, weird, aggressive, strange funk. We get some nice, light, airy vocals. We get a really gruff lead. Like we're all over the map, but all of a sudden things are clicking. And then we just get this run of songs that kill it. Anti-social media, jazzy, some backward mass percussion, this really cool, weird Twitter and Facebook references in the lyrics that maybe date poorly, but a weird but really memorable song. We get All In, total slow jam, this awesome bass riff in there, more just weird moods and rhythms just compiled in this one song. We get On Fire, low-key electronic jazz. We get horrible name, Ludi Poo da Pimp, which is like your comic book funk that Pete Parliament does, almost like a Gorillaz type. You almost expect like there's an animated part to go with this. That's absolutely amazing. And it just keeps going. Like the hits just keep coming, one after another. Mama Told Me, hip hop song with big Jay-Z type beats. We get Set Trip, some really nice James Brown funk with a hip hop vibe. And like we keep going. First disc, by the end of the first disc, I'm absolutely sold on this album. There's a couple R&B songs on here that don't sound like Parliament. They sound like they could be like a D'Angelo song or a Frank Ocean song, or like they sound like contemporary R&B. There's a couple hip-hop centric tracks on here. There's a lot more rap in here than in previous Parliament, but that's very much just George Clinton being aware of the world and also guesting on a Kendrick album. There's a lot of Kendrick style vibes on here. Clinton was on to Pimp a Butterfly. What is the name of that album? To Pimp a Butterfly. Yeah, but I'm going through this album. I get to CD2. I remember this, the first time I heard this. I was like halfway through the first side, kind of not in it. By the end of this, I listened to the second half of the first CD. I'm like, I'm all in. Super excited to listen to the second side. Second side kicks off with this fantastic horns and Dada. We get this song called Pain Management. Get some auto-tune in there, which I'm not a big fan of. Nice, really cool slow jam with some actually like impassioned vocals. We get this horn heavy Riddle Me This. And then they drop No Mo's, as in no mo's, no more. This is ridiculous. The bass groove, the energy. This is like a Fugees jam meets Funkadelic. It's got sort of a Tears for Eddie Hazel Ween type slow groove, but it's also got like, you could see Jay-Z or even like Kanye turning this into like a Kanye maybe on like My Beautiful Twisted Fantasy. Dropping this is just like an epic, or like a P. Diddy. I know P. Diddy's canceled at this point for reasons. Back in the day when P. Diddy was taking those epic grooves and laying stuff on them, this is an epic song. This almost entire thing is worth these 7 minutes and 10 seconds of No Mo's. No Mo's is amazing. And then the rest of the album, we just get some really, really nice, good funk, including the closing type 2, which sounds a lot like Kendrick because there's a lot of rap in there. A surprisingly strong outing from Clinton in Parliament in 2018. That's my number 7, Medicaid Fraud Dogg. And if you don't go listen to this album, it's got to be on YouTube. Go check out No Mo's, Nomos. It is just, it's an epic, epic jam, man. A great groove. Yeah, that's my number 7, Medicaid Fraud Dogg. My number 6 is their 5th, The Clones of Dr. Funkenstein. This came out in 1976. This is the one album that my friends who are Parliament fans generally love this album way more than I do. I still think this is a fantastic album, but it's at number 6 because I think the funk on this just seems a little more, I don't know if it's the production, but it seems a little more reined in, a little more just calmer, a little more just, I don't know if control's the right word, but maybe less chaotic or less threat of just random noisy chaos coming in. It's still a Parliament album. The funk is still great. I enjoy it, but it does seem that the journey from song to song to song, as solid as it is, doesn't seem as like fraught with like, oh, what's happening now type moments, which are good moments in music. For me, the highlight of this album, and I think this goes to how I personally think there's sort of a sameness to a lot of the funk on this one, is the song I've Been Watching You, parentheses, Move Your Sexy Body. A 6-minute song, drops. It's the second to last track out of the 9 tracks. And it is pretty much the closest thing on here to like a slow jam. It's kind of like a slow jam. It's like their version of like a really nice R&B slow jam. Like a Prince style, like, Adore type thing. International Lover. It's not that slow, but it's the closest thing. And it just feels like a breath of fresh air amidst everything else. It seems like, okay, here is something that actually is different. And even though the energy is going down instead of up, it still stands out for that. There's a loose concept about clones, funk clones, and you got that sort of, character driven kind of, I don't want to say cartoonish, but kind of theatrical aspect to this. You got backward masking vocals in here. Funk is its own reward. You got some great quotes. Funk is its own reward. It's just really nice horn arrangements on here, but everything's really clean and tight. And I do believe the horn arrangements were done by Fred Wesley, who used to work with James Brown. And I do think you can feel that sort of reined in energy, the tightness of like a James Brown funk without sort of the what's going to happen spontaneity of like a live James Brown. I'm sure if they take these same horn arrangements and drop them in a live scenario, that energy comes out. But there's just something about this album. Children of Production, you got some choral singing in there, some nice horns in there. Dr. Funkenstein, which was a single. Very similar vibe to Gaming on You, which was the second song. There's just, you got some trumpet in here that's pretty cool. Yeah, another really good song is "Everything Is on the One." You get some nice like lyrics with like like nice cool licks between hands, both whether they're keyboard licks or like horn runs that are going on between it. Um, but yeah, and then "Funkin' for Fun," kind of the closing track, starts with tight funk, but things really starting to loosen up by the end of that, and we get that little more party atmosphere that I think works better on a Parliament album. So yeah, a solid listen. I know people who love this album, so don't take my word for this. But me personally, this is my list. It's just a little too reined in. And other than I've been watching you, it doesn't have like that one drop, that just that classic that I have to rank it higher. Like the next one is probably a least consistent album, but it's got two songs on it that I have to, that are just so good. It has to be number five. But anyways, number six, The Clones of Dr. Funkenstein. My number five is their third, Chocolate City. We're talking about CC. Uh, this is their third, came out in 75. Two absolute all-time Parliament classics. Open up side A, one of them, the other one opened up side B. Chocolate City, the title track. One of the most low-key, chill, funky things this band has ever done. Clinton is mostly talking his way through the whole thing. He's giving shout-outs to CCs around the country. Apparently, he had read an article in which they were calling Atlanta the Chocolate City, and so, as a slur. And so, Clinton takes that term, puts it out, makes an album about it, makes one of the best songs about it, gives shout-outs to all the chocolate cities around the country. Chocolate City and their vanilla suburbs. Just, it's like taking the slur and owning it and making it powerful. Absolutely fantastic. We get an Up for the Downstroke reference in the lyrics. An awesome opener. Side two, or the sixth song on the album, is a song called Let Me Be. A nice piano intro, really upbeat, really groovy, goes into this art rock vibe. We get this weird cabaret vibe. Kind of reminds me of Frank Zappa's live 1984 arrangement of Thing Fish's The Evil Prince. It's not as theatrical and dynamic and sort of Broadway as that, but all of the sort of weird moving parts and all the keyboards that are all over the place, it kind of gives me that Evil Prince energy, but in the best way possible. Everything else on here is just solid Parliament music. Right on. You get some really nice Parliament's vocal aspect to that. Some sort of some really super funky wah-wah drops in there that are cool. Together is more pop funk, really heavy Parliament's presence. Side effects, some really great bass energy with some more sweet horn parts. What Comes Funky, just your straight up pop funk. You got the horns, you got the vocals, you got the bass. It's all coming together to work great. Side two, probably the most radio-friendly song on here. If it don't fit, don't force it. Kind of an upbeat 70s rock, almost. You could hear it on the radio. And then it goes into more like Parliament funkiness. I Misjudge You, kind of a slower R&B type ballad. And then we close out with Big Footin', which is horns. It's almost got like a Sam and Dave ba-dum-ba type horn intro energy. Upbeat, fun, funky, some good Bigfoot music. But yeah, probably from start to finish, not as consistent an album as the one that ranked as number six. But Chocolate City and Let Me Be are so fantastic that the goodwill that those two songs create carry through the rest of their respective sides of the album, that this has to be at number five. Chocolate City alone, that song, yeah. Number five, CC, Chocolate City. My number four is their number seven, 1978's Motor Booty Affair. I'm going to say that any album called Motor Booty Affair shouldn't have the right to be as good as this one is. I would say this is the tale of two halves. I think the first half of this is some really, really good Parliament funk. The second half of this is really, really mind-blowing, great Parliament funk. It is kind of a tale of two halves, but the first half is strong enough that it can make it all the way to number four. You get Mr. Wiggles to open up, kind of chill funk. You got a lot of like Clinton doing some talking. You got some nice horns in there. A lot of Aqua references in here. The big song on here was Aqua Boogie, a psycho alpha disco beta bio aqua do loop. Cannot say that word. That's one word. A lot of aqua and water references. That is the theme that is on this album. But the first four songs are strong. I just don't think they're fantastic. Mr. Wiggles, Rump of Steel Skin, which I believe was a hit, kind of plateaus out into a funk jam at the end, kind of loses its thread and just becomes like a jam, which sometimes is good. For this song, I think the first half is so good. It's almost like, let's keep the creativity, the dynamic sort of action going. You're a Fish and I'm a Water Sign. Really nice, sort of woozy, drunken, funky. I think it's a waltz. Really funky, woozy jazz energy. Aqua Boogie, really slippery aqua funk. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just a jam. Great keyboard sounds about halfway through this thing. You can see toward the end of this song the influence on Prince in later years. Some really nice funky jazz piano in the last minute and a half. Sort of like a funkier but not as dramatic version of David Bowie's Aladdin Sane, what the piano is doing. And that's the first half of the album. And it's really, really strong. Second half of the album is just absolutely great. One of those funky things, best groove on the album so far, just drops by far the groove you want to dance to forever. At 3.5 minutes, it's way too short. Liquid Sunshine, as a song called Liquid Sunshine should be, this is LSD tweaked funk. Yeah, this, if you were taking some Liquid Sunshine, this is probably the type of funk you would make, and that's a good thing. This is happy, joyful Liquid Sunshine. The Motor Booty Affair, the bass, the bass, the bass. Can we talk about the bass? And then Deep, the song I talked about way back when I was talking about the album number 10. The Deep is ridiculous. It is a funky jam. Early Prince, Wanna Be Your Lover type vibes. It just goes into some hardcore funk energy. This has crazy vocals, crazy bass, crazy horns. It's frantic yet focused. It's a tour de force of Parliament funk. Like, what is this? Album number 7? Like, the second half of this album. Like, if they're running out of steam, if they're running out of ideas, whatever happened halfway through this album, we're all of a sudden like, the future is bright, man. This is going to be good. Unfortunately, the next two albums, other than the first song on the next album, which I talked about, don't really carry forward the energy of the second album, of the second half. But man, Motor Booty Affair. This is an album where you go from just having a great time to having one of the best times of your life by the end of it. It goes deep in the best, funkiest way possible. That is my number 4, if I'm not mistaken. That's my number 4, Motor Booty Affair. My number 3 is their second 1974's Up for the Downstroke. Everybody get up. Took 4 years off after they made their debut. They came back and dropped as a lead track Up for the Downstroke. Parliament had arrived. Yeah, I mean, Bernie's here, Eddie's here, Bootsy's on bass, Gary's also on guitar, drummer's Gary Bronson, and Fullwood's on drummers. You got Parliament's doing the vocals. Like, this is it. The sound is here. It's been born. And I think the weird thing is, there's a lot of really great funk songs on here. They do a cover of the Parliament song Testify. I don't think that was the original name of it. I Want to Testify. Here it's just Testify. And they add like the funky horns, the funky keys. They funkify that. But I think my 2 favorite moments on this are 2 really kind of slower songs on the second half of the album. All Your Goodies Are Gone, which is like kind of this mid-tempo groove, kind of chill, kind of rhythm and bluesy, kind of like this sneaky sort of like, there's this almost calm layer on top of what the song's presenting, but underneath you have this really just funky rhythm section with some really cool piano action going on. Just a really, not what it appears to be on the surface, really awesome listen. And then the song that follows that, whatever makes baby feel good, slower, bluesier, again, really nice piano action. We get some guitar, just random screaming throughout. It's just like a really funky, slow blues number. Something that they would kind of get away from. Great soloing by Eddie Hazel. Really just nice sound on his guitar. But 2 of the more sort of not traditionally Parliament funky songs, I think, are the highlights. But everything else on here is just really good. The Goose is kind of a slower ballad type number. Really nice, long, slow jam on this, but it's just a groove. I think Eddie Hazel co-wrote The Goose. I Can Move You, some upbeat funk rock. I Just Got Back from the fantasy Ahead of Our Time in the Four Lands of Ellet. Don't know what that's about. Softer, acoustic-y, almost singer-songwriter-esque, but funky. You know, everything on here has got some funk. And then the closing, Presence of a Brain, kind of reminds me of like Santana energy at times. But it's more just like a Santana doing funk pop type song, like a traditional type song. But yeah, just a really, really, really solid funk, elements of R&B, little blues, guitar, awesome album. Yeah, for their second, amazing. But yeah, it gets better. But that's my number 3. Up for the downstroke. My number 2 is Mothership Connection. Their 4th album came out in 75. This is the first of arguably 2 perfect funk albums. I'm not going to argue about number 1 on this list. That is a perfect funk album. This is probably the second of the 2 perfect funk albums. Opens up with P-Funk, Wants to Get Funked Up, which is such a great, weird song. You got that like sort of jazz, funky, low-key type vibe with like talking narration, and then you just drop into like these awesome like groove moments throughout the song. I do feel like it is such an awesome opener. It sets up the rest of this album so perfectly that I feel like this rest of the album should be a double album. Like I feel like P-Funk, Wants to Get Funked Up is such a classic opener. We need twice as much music as we get. If there's a flaw to this album, it doesn't give us twice as much music as it gets. But it just has it's one of the greatest intros to any album ever. We get Mothership Connection. Star Child appears for the first time Star Child appeared on the first 3 albums. I don't think so. He would appear on other albums. Party is continuing. We got more narration, some great horns in there. We're a little more focused, a little more upbeat, funky. We get a Chocolate City callback to the previous album. This kind of just becomes a loose funk jam, but in the best way possible. Unfunky UFO has this really subdued, kind of reminds me of Superstition, Stevie Wonder type intro. By far the most focused song so far on this album. Funk rock, we can show them how to funk. Really good. Unfunky UFO is definitely not unfunky. Side 2 opens up with super groovalistic prosy funksification. I said that horribly wrong. I haven't been practicing saying these titles. Awesome keyboards. Almost sounds like a Doobie Brothers singing Parliament album. Like there is a foot in sort of the pop radio friendly AOR world. And we're just funkifying that to its core. But yeah, great synthesizer sound on this. This is almost like the keyboard solo on this is almost like where we get the G-Funk sound. Like Dr. Dre was listening to this stuff when he came up with G-Funk, because this is like Bernie is just like top of his game right here. Bernie is bringing like all the sounds, all the organs, all the moogs. Like Bernie is he's hitting home run after home run after home run. Half handcuffs. Whoever's singing the song is so much in love that he's willing to put his girl in handcuffs and keep her barefoot and pregnant. So interesting lyrics. Nice, really funky, loose energy. But then we get Give Up the Funk, Tear the Roof Off the Sucker. Yeah, I mean, what to say about this? The bass, it's an all-time classic. It's an all-time banger. It's the second to last song on the album. It is absolutely ridiculous. And then we managed to keep the party going with Night of the Thumpasaurus People. Some really nice horn-leading funky stuff, some great bass, nice cool patient jam. At times, it almost sounds like an opener. It has that feel where we're still like revving up for more stuff. Awesome keyboard sounds. Long instrumental setup before we get to any vocals on this. It's like 5 minutes, but I don't think I think it's like 3 minutes before we even get to the first vocals. It takes a while. And then we get some almost weird, like we're about to go into like Rick Dees's like Disco Duck. We get some weird like duck sounds on some sort of instrument. But yeah, it's a weird, really indulgent, why is this all of a sudden happen type Parliament funk type thing to close the album. Yeah, like it could be a perfect album. Like I don't know where the flaws are. It's too short. That's the flaw. But yeah, that's my number 2, the Mothership Connection. And my number 1 is Funkentelechy, I'm sure that's mispronounced. Funkentelechy versus the Placebo Syndrome. Not good at pronouncing things, and my memory's crap. 6 songs. This is a perfect funk album. It opens up with Bop Gun, parentheses, endangered species, which might be the purest, greatest funk bop ever. This is a bop, as the kids are saying. And it literally is just 8 minutes and 30 plus seconds of the goat of funk music. It's just a jam, and about halfway through it, maybe a little halfway through it, around the 5.5 minute mark, we just get this little brief sort of like, just kind of like drops out for a second, and it almost seems like maybe we're going to go in a different direction. Then like 20 seconds later, we're just right back into the jam. It's the Bop Gun, open. Closes with Flashlight. Bernie Worrell is playing the bass keyboard, the keyboard bass on Flashlight. If that's not one of the greatest sounds in the history of funk music, / if not the history of music, I don't know what is. Second song on this album, Sir Noise, Devoid of Funk. Pay attention, B3M. Despite that, title should not work. This is the type of funk. This is like a sleazy, sort of dramatic, sort of space funk. Like you get the dominant vocals, you get weird sleazy space energy, you get like some character type stuff. This is the type of, like, if we were living in the Star Wars universe and we were going to the cantina where Han shot first, if we were there the night that Han shot first, or the afternoon that Han shot first, it was obviously like maybe jazz night at the club. There's another night of the week that's funk night. This is what Sir Nose, Devoid of Funk, is what that band is playing on funk night at the cantina where Han shot first. Or that place that Lando hangs out when Lando is Childish Gambino. That's the kind of music that they're. It's almost the King Gizzard of like funk of the 70s. Like they're just creating sounds that sound like nobody else. Yeah, it's funk, but does anybody else sound like this? Nobody else sounds like this. It's absolutely fantastic. Wizard of Finance, almost tapping into our Parliament's roots. Almost got a little like funk doo-wop energy, some like 50s retro stuff going in here. It's like if Reuben and the Jets met like George Clinton and they tried to make an album. Or if the Parliaments made an album that was futuristic, that would be this. Really nice classic vibe, nice sax solo. Of course, the bass is fantastic. Funkentelechy. I am not good at names. 11 minutes of a funk groove that's just like awesome. Urge Overkill, the band, got its name from one of the lyrics on here. We get a lot of just really nice funky passages with horns, with the drum doing great stuff, piano stuff. It's just some really friggin' great. It is a party. Placebo Syndrome. We're flirting with sexy slow jam energy in here. A little softer vocals. The horns have a more seductive quality in there. This is also kind of space funk in that it kind of sounds like nothing else, but there's also something soothing about this, something comforting in the vocals, kind of a much needed like sort of rest after the funk craziness that's preceded us. But the contrast, everything that preceded, it's not like a needed rest like on that other album where like we're in the same stuff, I need a rest. This is like, no, we just need this little break, because then we close out with Flashlight, which is just like that main riff that runs through here. This is another goat song of funk. The bass, the keys, Worrell, just absolutely amazing, hands down. This is such a good funk album that it might be one of the 100 greatest albums of all time, though, spoiler alert, that is a topic for another video I've yet to make or drop on this channel. So anyways, my number 1, without hesitation, I'm going to mispronounce the name one more time. Funkentelechy. Funkentelechy, I should have Googled it or something. Funkentelechy versus the Placebo Syndrome. Just absolutely ridiculous. And that's what they look like in typewritten form. Funkentelechy. Fantastic. Really, you're looking at a couple just enjoyable but weaker albums at the bottom. You get a weird one at number 8, which kind of doesn't sound like Parliament. You get a surprisingly strong effort. And then the top 6 are all just really good with some absolutely great highlights. But those top 2 are darn near perfect funk albums. I will argue that number 1, Funkentelechy, is a perfect funk album. Mothership Connection, I also think is perfect, but I do think maybe every song isn't as grand slam home run is on my number 1, but they're all fantastic, absolutely amazing band. But yeah, that's my thoughts on George Clinton's Parliament. I'm going to take a little break from George Clinton. I have another couple bands I'm going to do. Then I'm going to do the Funkadelic stuff, which also, Funkadelic also may have an album that should be in the top 100 list, I'm going to argue. May drop that video before I drop the Funkadelic video, so it'll give away that ending, but hey, that's okay. Let me know your thoughts on Parliament, what I messed up on, how I mispronounced all the words, all that kind of stuff. I'm not good about that stuff. But yeah, man, these are my opinions on this band. Let me know your opinions on this band and whether or not you agree with mine. But yeah, thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, share, comment, do all those things. And go listen to Funkentelechy versus the Placebo Syndrome because it is a perfect funk album. Peace. Talk to you later.